The beginning of all philosophy for Schopenhauer is the axiom, "The world is my representation." Sensibility is representation for us, through our pure intuitions in the categories, of the thing in itself. Knowledge is also representation, for all such concepts borrow their contents only by the representation of perception. Therefore, knowledge in thinking has no direct relationship with being, as thinking has a relation only to perceiving, but perceiving has a relation to the being in itself of what is perceived. And so objective knowledge, starting from representation, will never go beyond it. But we're not merely knowing subjects. We ourselves are among the realities we require to know. Kant held that knowledge without its basis in perceptions is empty, and that as perception gives only phenomena and not things in themselves, we therefore have no knowledge of things in themselves. Schopenhauer admits this of everything, except knowledge we have of our own willing, for it's neither conceptual nor empty. It's known to us immediately, and not merely through representation. We cannot say that the subject of volition would be an object for us, as the identity of the known with what is known as willing is immediately given. This knowledge is a posteriori, and so everyone knows his will only in its successive individual acts, not as a whole. In the emergence of the act of will from our inner being into knowing consciousness, there occurs a direct transition into the phenomena of the thing in itself that lies outside time. Schopenhauer has not so modified Kant's doctrine to say that the thing in itself is knowable, but that acts of the will, as its most immediate phenomena, distinguishable among phenomena by its immediacy, is its representation for us. The being in itself of things can then be characterized by our inner nature from which acts of will emerge. Hence the world is will, Wille zum Leben, and its representations. Therefore, the being in itself of all things is of a like kind. As thing in itself, will constitutes the inner, indestructible nature of man, yet is itself without consciousness. Consciousness is conditioned by the intellect, which is an accident of our being as a function of the brain and the whole organism. It serves the purpose of self-preservation by regulating its conduct with the external world. Schopenhauer holds that in all knowledge, the known and not the knower is the first and essential thing. Therefore, in self-consciousness, the first essential thing is the known, the will. Consciousness is animal consciousness, and so its foundation is immediate awareness of longing for satisfaction and non-satisfaction, a willing for existence, life, well-being, and propagation. From our own inner nature, we understand the expressions of animals agitated by willing, and through this we can sympathize with them. The difference between them and us, then, is solely a difference of intellect. Therefore, the will is primary, the intellect secondary, a mere tool in the service of the will. The intellect may, though, furnish the will with motives, but it's wholly a posteriori. The intellect tires, but the will is untiring. The intellect is inert unless put into motion by the will. In life, our will's desires are unlimited, its claims inexhaustible, and every satisfied desire gives birth to a new one. Satisfactions are often our bare maintenance, extorted daily in constant conflicts with misery and want, and with the prospect of death close by. All happiness is to be frustrated, and the grounds of this are in the very nature of things. Life is but continual deception, happiness is in the future and the past. If the world and life were an end in itself, our troubles would be offset by the pleasures in it, but this is impossible. For present pain is never abolished by future pleasures, and the former eventually fills the latter. Therefore, life is suffering. The law of causality, acting through the medium of the intellect, is motivation. Intelligible character is the thing in itself constituted in itself as time and space, accompanying all acts of the individual. Empirical character is the phenomena, the succession of acts, and so is determined by intelligible character. Therefore, empirical character is unchangeable, meaning that we cannot self-form motives which change our nature of motive forming. To think that our character is changeable through moral instruction arrived at by reason is to appeal to freedom for a thing which is subject only to necessity. Schopenhauer holds that an appeal to ought about morality only has a place in theological morals. Ethics, therefore, has no educated foundation. It is strictly a doctrine of the unchangeableness of character, for different individual acts arise out of our inner nature. Egoism is the urgent impulse to exist, and exist under the best circumstances, and this egoism is the fundamental incentive in all animals. To prevent the disastrous consequences of egoism is a negative procedure seen in everyday life through manners and government. Therefore, egoism is the principal force that the moral motive must contend against. So if voluntary justice and unselfish loving kindness do not occur in experience, there's nothing more to say about ethics. Schopenhauer thinks that, though rare, such motives do exist. These motives are absent egoism and are therefore the criterion of moral action. All acts either have this compassion, virtue, or egoism, vice, as their root. Egoism is innate in every animal, and they share our inner nature. Compassion towards animals arises from the same source as virtue towards men. Naturally, then, moral motives and actions extend to all animals, for who is cruel to a living creature cannot be a good man. Therefore, egoism and morality exclude each other, and morality is compassion. Regarding aesthetics, the problem of the beautiful is, how is it possible for us to take pleasure in an object when this object has no kind of connection with our desires? Pleasure in a thing arises from its relation to our will, in other words, from our aims. So it seems a contradiction to have pleasure divorced from this stimulation. Schopenhauer's solution is that, in the beautiful, we always perceive the intrinsic and primary forms of animate and inanimate nature, that is to say, Plato's ideas thereof, and that this perception stipulates the existence of its essential correlative, the will-less subject of knowledge. Happiness, gratification, and the like are negative, the cessation of suffering. The primary world of will is the world of desire, and so suffering, while the secondary world of idea is intrinsically painless, meaning, in transforming the willing subject into a purely knowing subject conscious of himself and his actions, he enjoys the painless, remarkable spectacle of idea. Regarding the intellect, knowledge is consciousness of other things, the antithesis of mere self-consciousness, and in man this has reached its highest degree in thought. For the intellect in the service of the will, there are only individual things. For the intellect engaged in art and science, there are only universals. Because the will aims at individual things, its objectives, which possess only empirical reality, concepts and kinds can only become its objective indirectly. The capacity for general truths is the intensity of the intellect. This is why the poet's presentations can be appreciated by audiences of varied intellects, as the listener forms their own understanding from the material, and why the philosopher's presentations can only be appreciated by those of a certain intellect because they present finished thoughts. Thoughts being the product of two fundamentally different factors, the quality of thoughts comes from within, the direction of thought from without. Objects of thought is to the mind only what the plectrum is to the lyre. The intellect is said to be pure the more completely it's separated from the will, which engenders it. Only when intellect exceeds the measure needed for living does knowledge become more or less an end in itself. It's a movement from the intellect's natural vocation, serving the will by perceiving the mere relation between things, to occupying itself purely objectively. This objective use of the intellect is produced by an urge not originally for that purpose. Schopenhauer says this is why so many can only talk intelligently about their business. They think about such things more generally because it's bounded with willing. So to talk with someone about an objective thing when this person only ever takes subjective interests is to be degraded. The intellect's natural role is as a means to life. But in genius, the abnormal enjoyment of the intellect becomes the main thing, meaning his existence becomes the means, a total reversal. This is, as the intellect serves the will, an impediment, for objective clarity furnishes the world with more than's requisite for serving the will. This abundance is an hindrance, as objective knowledge enfeebles subjective knowledge about mere desire relations, and so throws subjective knowledge into disorder. The individual possessed of genius is compelled to express what they see and feel in enduring works. And this takes place with the same sort of necessity that a tree brings forth fruit, and demands of the world no more than a soil on which the individual can flourish.